let's start scripting. If you want to be good at anything in life, you need to have a good understanding of the basics. And scripting is really no different to any other skill. It simply takes practice, and like any other skill, once you have the basic knowledge down, you're only going to get better. So in this video, we're going to start you off with some basic scripting skills, and we'll build on this knowledge over the next few videos. Now, as I mentioned in the first video in this series, I'm going to be using a script editor rather than Notepad, and this one happens to be PrimalScript. Now, you'll notice that throughout these videos that some script editors like this one color code your scripts, which makes them easier to read, so that's the main reason for me using this product in this video. Again, Notepad will certainly do the same thing, although if you're at all serious about scripting, you'll probably appreciate what a real script editor can do. Alright, well, back to scripting. The first thing I want to talk about is providing comments in your scripts. No matter how good you become at scripting, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you at this early stage is to become proficient at commenting your scripts. Now notice at the top of my script here, in the script's header, we have some comments here that are provided in green. Now these comments are purely informational. They serve no other purpose than letting you write things like who wrote the script, perhaps the date it was written. You could write version numbers here so you can keep track of any changes that you've made. So to write your own comments in a VBScript, simply type in an apostrophe and then start typing in your own comments. Now comments can and should also be written in the body of your script as well, where you can provide information to the person reading your script about what a line of code does. Now make no mistake, providing meaningful comments here is a useful thing to do, not only for other people, but for you yourself as well. Now I myself have often written scripts and come back months later and taken a quick look at it, only to think, what the heck does this do? Writing comments in your script doesn't take long, but will really come in handy later on. Okay, well the first actual line in our script here says option explicit. Now this line tells your script that every variable that you have in your script must be defined before it can be used. Now if you choose to leave option explicit out of your script, then any statement that VBScript doesn't recognize will be treated as a variable. Now with our next line here, on error, resume next, a VBScript doesn't have to have this line included, and sometimes it's beneficial to leave it out altogether. Now what this line does is when your script encounters an error, it'll simply resume running at the next line in the script. Now when you're building and testing your script, sometimes it can be useful to leave this line out altogether or simply comment it out by using the apostrophe. Why? Because when your script runs, it'll exit when it encounters the error, allowing you to troubleshoot where the error occurred, and that of course can be useful, especially when you have large scripts. Now when you're satisfied that your script is working and ready to be released, you can put this line back in or simply uncomment it. Now this means that if in the future your script does encounter an error that you didn't expect, it'll still run and still do everything else that it needed to do. Now this can be beneficial, especially with scripts like logon scripts where you don't want to be inundated with phone calls when every person in your company who attempts to log on in the morning gets an error from your script. By leaving this line intact, people will still have their logon script run, and you can go and fix the error later at your own leisure. Okay, we've already briefly mentioned variables, and the next line of our script here is where we have declared our first variable. Now you can declare a variable by prefacing the variable name with the keyword dim. Now for those of you that simply have to know, dim simply means dimension. So to declare a variable, we use the keyword dim, followed by a name for a variable, which can be practically anything you like. The general rule here, however, is that variable names should be descriptive and they can only be used once in your script. Now if you take a good look through scripts that other people have written, and particularly those from Microsoft themselves, you'll quickly note that their variable names follow strict rules. For example, you'll see objects start with obj for the object, and then an abbreviation of whatever the object is. So here you can see we've declared obj or object FSO, which will be used later on for the file system object. Now you can also declare more than one variable on the same line like we have here on our second line. Just separate each one with a comma. So when you declare your variables, there's really no right or wrong here. Just remember that if you want your scripts to be easy to read later on, when naming your variables, name them something descriptive. Now notice here underneath this line that I have declared two variables. I've just called them literal numeric and literal string for the purposes of this video. At this point, they're simply variables and can contain anything I choose to assign to them. But if we scroll down a little bit here, we can see here that I've now made them literals by directly assigning a value to them. Now a literal is simply a value that you directly type into a script that doesn't change over the script's lifetime. Now this can be something like a number, a host name of a computer, and so on. Now literals are useful because unlike variables that can change depending on what your script has done, a literal doesn't change. Now if the value you assign to a literal is a number, it doesn't go in quotes like you see here. However, if it is a string, it does need to be enclosed in quotation marks. Now moving back up here, we can see the next line that we have here is const. Now const means constant. You see, when you create a variable, the value that's contained inside that variable can change throughout the course of your script. So let's say I want to measure how much hard disk space I have free. So I tell my script to pull the value of how much disk space is left on my C drive. The result comes back, and let's assume it's 1 GB free. So the variable I created to store the free space of my hard disk now contains the value of 1 GB. Then whilst my script is running, I copy a 200 meg file to my hard disk. Towards the end, the script again pulls the status of my hard disk, and this time it's 800 meg. So the value in my variable for my hard disk has then changed to 800 meg. So here we can see why the value of a variable could change throughout the course of a running script. Now using a constant allows us to set a value which will not change throughout the script. So in this example, I've set a constant here which I've called hostname and given it a value of server 01. So in effect, we've forced hostname to have a value of server 01 throughout the entirety of our script, regardless of what our script does. So using const is a nice way of making sure we can control data in situations where we're expecting a value to be returned. Now in the case of dimming a variable, it's in fact, as the name describes, variable. Now notice that my constant names here are in uppercase. Now they don't have to be in uppercase, by the way, but it's common practice to write them in uppercase. Okay, now we're at the end of what's commonly known as the header of your script. Normally your variables are included in the header since a variable by itself doesn't actually do anything. Any line of code that performs some sort of task will be listed after your header information, and this section of the script is known as the worker information section. Now, it's not really all that important to know this, by the way. I can pretty much guarantee that as you progress in your scripting career, or even complete this video series, you'll have probably forgotten all about it anyway. I will point out that the main purpose of this script that we've got here really isn't to produce anything useful. It's really just designed to highlight some of the very basics of scripting. So what you've just learnt is 3 of the most basic things in scripting, and that's how to declare a variable, create a literal, and how to create a constant and why you'd use each. Now I do have another script here just so we can quickly run over a couple of other things just to make sure you fully understand them. What I want to point out here is how these 2 lines here, option explicit and on error resume next, really works. Okay, in this short script, we've specified option explicit, and remember, this line tells your script that every variable you have in your script must be defined before it can be used. Now let's skip to the 3rd line here in our script where we've defined a literal, but we have not declared it by using the dim statement anywhere in our script. So this means that since we have option explicit in our script, then this line will actually be ignored and will actually produce an error. But our 2nd line here, on error resume next, won't stop our script when this error does occur. It'll simply continue on as is. So the final line of our script, which is to produce a message box containing the value of our literal here of 10, will actually be empty, and as such it won't run. But let's go and run our script anyway. So if we go down here, we'll go to our command prompt and we'll run our script, which is simply called second.vbs. We can see that when it runs, nothing happens as we expected. So what if we remove the onErrorResumeNext line so that our script will terminate if it finds any errors? Alright, well, we'll go back to our scripting editor and we'll comment out our onErrorResumeNext line, and I'll just save this. We'll go back to our command prompt and we'll run our script again. Alright, this time our script terminates with an error and we're pointed in the right direction with VB telling us that our script errored on line 9. Now this is quite useful, as I said earlier in this video, since it allows you to pinpoint where your script is having problems, making it easier to troubleshoot. Alright, well, let's go and fix the error. Now we've got two ways to fix this problem, the right way and my way. Now truth be told, the correct way of solving this problem is first to declare a variable, and that variable would be called test, and then the problem will simply go away. Now my way of correcting this problem, just for the purposes of this demonstration of course, is to comment out our option explicit line. Of course, if we comment out this line, then any statement that VBScript doesn't recognize will be treated as a variable. So our test literal here that we created would be treated as if we actually declared it in the first place. Alright, well, we'll save this and we'll go back, we'll run our script again. Okay, this time our script runs just fine and we're presented with a pop-up window showing us the value of our literal, which of course is 10. Alright, in this video we've taken a look at the very basic building blocks of a VB script. You've seen how to declare a variable, a literal and a constant, as well as how to comment scripts and how and why you should use the option explicit and onErrorResumeNext statements. In the next video in this series, we'll build on this knowledge and we'll take a look at using arrays.